1998, teenagers in Iceland were actually some of the heaviest drinkers in Europe.
Yeah, which is hard to believe now.
Right, because fast forward to today, and they are statistically some of the absolute cleanest.
Like, completely turned it around.
Exactly. And the wild part is, the government didn't achieve this by, plastering the walls with just, say, no posters or running those really scary anti-drug commercials.
Right, they didn't do the usual playbook at all?
No, they pulled it off by doing something that sounds completely unrelated. They subsidized martial arts, hip-hop, and art classes.
It sounds like a total non sequitur, but the strategy behind it is rooted in some of the most fascinating economic and psychological engineering we have ever seen on a national scale.
And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are looking at this incredible stack of sources. We've got a set of core economic presentation slides on market failures, a really interesting case study on the Tesla Cybertruck, and then, that massive public health report on Iceland's turnaround.
Which seem like three completely different topics.
They really do. But they all share this one core thread. They show what happens when the private choices you make spill over onto everyone else. So, okay, let's unpack this.
A good way to visualize this whole concept is think about tossing a rock into a pond.
Okay, I like that.
When you buy something or decide to take up a new habit, the transaction feels like it's just the rock hitting the water, you and the cashier. But the splash creates ripples.
Right, the ripples travel outward.
Exactly. In economics, those invisible ripples, the impact your private choices have on completely uninvolved third parties, those are called externalities.
And those ripples can be seriously harmful, right?
Yeah.
The sources dive into what happens when the free market just over-provides things that create negative ripples.
Yeah, the technical term the slides use here is demerit goods.
Demerit goods. So
Right.
we are talking about cigarettes, alcohol, gambling,
Yeah.
or, to pull from the modern example in our sources, driving a 6,000-pound stainless steel Tesla Cybertruck.
Yeah, the Cybertruck. What's fascinating here is that it is just such a perfect lens for this concept. It so clearly illustrates the disconnect between the person buying the product and the society around them.
Because they have, over 1.9 million pre-orders in the U.S. alone?
Yeah, people love them. Because when you buy a massive, rugged, futuristic vehicle like that, you are looking strictly at your own benefit, the marginal private benefit.
Right.
You get a high-performance, durable, incredibly safe vault to drive around in. Your personal benefit is huge.
But society basically fits the bill for the ripples. It makes me think about, being on a really crowded subway.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine someone walks onto the train wearing this massive, rigid metal hiking backpack.
Just taking up all the space.
Exactly. For the person wearing it, it's fantastic. Their laptop is completely safe. Their posture is totally supported by the frame. But for everyone else trying to navigate that shared space, it's an absolute hazard. Every time the person turns around, someone else gets bruised.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. Because the buyer completely ignores the social cost of that backpack, or in this case, the truck.
All right. The buyer isn't thinking about the ripples.
Not at all. And if you look at the mechanics of the Cybertruck spillovers from the case study, they are expensive. Take the weight, for instance.
Oh, 6,000 pounds.
Which is massive. And road damage doesn't scale linearly, it actually scales exponentially with weight. So a vehicle that heavy accelerates the wear and tear on local roads at a really alarming rate.
Meaning the city, and by extension, all the taxpayers have to pay for the potholes and the repaving way sooner than they would if everyone just drove standard sedans.
Plus, even though it is an electric vehicle, dragging 6,000 pounds of steel around requires significantly more energy than, say, a smaller commuter EV.
Oh, sure.
You have massive tires generating more noise pollution, a heavier mechanical structure, all of it.
And we haven't even touched on the direct physical safety hazards, which the sources highlight. If you are walking or cycling, the Cybertruck is a completely different beast to get hit by.
Yeah, it's a major concern.
The stainless steel exterior creates this dangerous glare in the sun, which is bad enough. But it also lacks a traditional bumper and standard crumple zones.
Right, because physics dictates that in a collision, the energy has to go somewhere.
Exactly.
If the truck doesn't crumple to absorb the impact, that energy is transferred directly to whatever it hits, which drastically increases the risk of severe catastrophic injury for a pedestrian.
While the driver is perfectly fine inside their vault.
Exactly. The cost is pushed entirely onto the cyclist or the pedestrian or the city's healthcare infrastructure. The marginal social benefit is way lower than the private benefit.
So the free market looks at this and says, hey, people want them, keep making them. The quantity consumed is way higher than what is actually safe or optimal for society,
Yep, it's a classic market failure.
which explains why the European Union essentially banned the Cybertruck. The source mentions that regulations heavily prioritize pedestrian safety, and they have very strict standards for vehicle dimensions.
Right, they looked at the ripples and said, no, the math doesn't work for us.
They prioritize the social benefit over the private benefit.
They did. But outright banning something is usually the nuclear option. Most of the time, governments try to use a different playbook to fix these negative spillovers.
Right, because you can't just ban everything that has a downside. I mean, where does it end? So if the market is failing by over-consuming these demerit goods, whether it's giant trucks or classically cigarettes, how does a government step in?
Well, the standard economic toolkit from the slides relies on a few levers. You have negative advertising and education.
Like the posters.
Yeah. And then you have market-based solutions, most notably something called a Pigouvian tax.
Right, named after the economist Arthur Pigou.
Exactly. And the core idea behind a Pigouvian tax is to force the buyer to actually feel the pain of the ripples they are causing.
So making them internalize the externality.
That's the exact phrase, yeah. If a pack of cigarettes costs a certain amount to make, the government slaps a heavy indirect tax on top of it. They artificially inflate the price tag by the exact amount of the estimated cost to society's healthcare system.
Okay, so the theory is that if it costs more, fewer people will buy it, and consumption naturally drops back down to a level society can actually handle.
That is the textbook theory, yes.
Wait, but humans are incredibly stubborn. I mean, teenagers especially. If a teenager already knows that smoking causes lung cancer, and they still choose to light up, does a poster campaign or an extra tax on a pack of smokes actually solve the market failure? Or does it just create a brand new set of problems?
You are hitting on the exact fatal flaw of the traditional playbook.
Really?
Yeah. The sources show that these textbook fixes are incredibly messy in the real world. Anti-smoking education often falls completely flat on teenagers because, well, many of them are fully prepared to accept the dangers.
Yeah, teenagers think they're invincible.
Right. And in some cases, telling a teen something is lethal just elevates its status as a tool for rebellion.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm?
But what about the taxes? If you double the price of cigarettes, shouldn't that logically cut the number of smokers in half?
It would if we were talking about, say, luxury watches or concert tickets. But cigarettes involve nicotine. They are habit-forming.
Oh, right. The addiction factor.
Exactly. Economists call this inelastic demand. Because the addiction drives the behavior, jacking up the price doesn't actually reduce the quantity demanded by very much at all.
So people just pay it.
Basically, people can just absorb the financial hit, drain their bank accounts, and keep smoking.
Wow. So the government might collect a ton of revenue, but they completely fail to stop the negative externality.
Yeah. And the sources point out that if you push those taxes too high, human ingenuity kicks in and things get really chaotic.
Because people try to find a way around it.
Consumers will always look for a workaround. The slides highlight how smokers in Austria, for example, will literally just drive across the border into Slovakia, load up their trunks with cheaper, lower tax cigarettes, and drive back.
That's wild. Just international smuggling for personal use.
It is. And in Australia, massive taxes pushed consumers toward unprocessed, loose-leaf tobacco or completely unregulated e-cigarettes.
Which means you accidentally create a black market.
Exactly.
You try to solve a public health issue, and you inadvertently fund organized crime or unregulated border smuggling.
Yeah, the unintended consequences are huge.
And even partial bans have this whack-a-mole effect, right? If you ban smoking in restaurants, the smoke doesn't vanish. It just gets pushed out to public park benches. Or worse, inside private cars with the windows rolled up and kids in the back seat.
And think about the logistics of enforcing all that. A government has to hire inspectors, field complaints, hand out fines. It's incredibly costly.
Yeah, that's a massive bureaucratic headache.
Plus, smokers are voters. If a politician pushes too hard on taxing a habit people love, they seriously risk being voted out of office entirely.
So using this stick, punishing bad habits with taxes and bans, is just fraught with loopholes, black markets, and political resistance.
It really is.
So if slapping a tax on bad behavior fails, what happens if society tackles the problem from the exact opposite direction? What if we try using the carrot instead?
This flips the script entirely. Now we are looking at positive consumption externalities.
Okay, good ripples.
Right. These are associated with what economists call merit goods. Things like education, healthcare, immunizations.
So these are things where the ripples in the pond are actually a net positive for everyone else, even the people who didn't buy the good.
Precisely. When someone consumes a merit good, society gets a massive free benefit. An educated person is generally more economically productive, they're less likely to rely on social safety nets, and they are statistically associated with lower crime rates.
The whole community levels up because one person went to school.
Exactly.
Think of it like someone installing a massive, ultra-bright, state-of-the-art security light in their front yard on a really dark street.
Oh, that's a great way to picture it.
Right. They pay for the light bulb, they pay the electricity bill because they want their own driveway lit. But because of that light, the entire block gets free security.
Yeah.
Nobody's car gets broken into. The neighbors benefit immensely, but the free market doesn't force the neighbors to chip in for the electricity bill.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the market failure here. Because the person installing the light isn't getting compensated for the neighbor's benefit, they might decide it's just too expensive to keep running it all night.
So they turn it off.
Right. So the free market underallocates resources to merit goods. People just don't consume enough of them.
Either because they can't afford it, or maybe consumer ignorance, like not fully understanding the vital importance of herd immunity, so they just skip their immunizations.
And that underconsumption creates a welfare loss. Society is literally leaving potential health, wealth, and safety on the table.
So if I'm a government and I want you to consume more of this good stuff, I basically have two options. I either have to force you to do it, or I have to make it so cheap and accessible that you'd be crazy not to. Right.
That is the positive playbook in a nutshell. To force it, they use compulsory legislation, like making school attendance mandatory until age 15, for example.
Okay.
To make it accessible, they use subsidies. A government will artificially lower the price tag for the producers, which essentially floods the market with the good stuff.
So making it cheaper for everyone.
Right. Or they go all the way to direct provision. The state just builds the school or the hospital and makes it free at the point of use.
But there's friction here, too. Handing out free healthcare or free education is unbelievably expensive.
It is a massive budget constraint. A lot of developing nations simply do not have the tax revenue to provide universal healthcare, so their societies completely miss out on those positive ripples.
And even in wealthy countries, people generally despise being told what to do, even if it's genuinely for their own good.
Oh, the autonomy issue is huge. Look at the growing momentum of anti-vaccine movements. Many view government immunization mandates not as a public health measure, but as a direct infringement on their civil liberties.
And the sources outline Australia's policy on this, and it is intense.
Very intense.
They implemented this no jab, no pay rule. If parents refuse to vaccinate their kids, they actively lose their right to state child care benefits. They can even be banned from sending their kids to preschool.
Which is an incredibly heavy-handed way to force a positive externality. And it really shows how delicate this is. You are trying to guarantee herd immunity, which is a clear, mathematically proven social benefit, but you spark massive public backlash by stepping on personal autonomy to get there.
It's a really tough balance. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
We've mapped out the theory. We see the messy reality of taxing bad things and the intense friction of mandating good things. So let's move from the textbook into the real world. Let's look at an absolute masterclass in fixing a market failure.
Oh, this is the best part.
We're going back to 1990s Iceland.
The Youth in Iceland initiative is arguably one of the most remarkable public health turnarounds in modern history.
To set the scene for you, in 1998, Iceland had a full-blown teenage crisis. 42% of 15 and 16-year-olds have been drunk in the past month.
Almost half.
Yeah, and nearly a quarter of them were smoking every single day. The sources describe downtown Reykjavik as feeling genuinely unsafe on a Friday night because of these roaming groups of intoxicated teenagers.
They were drowning in a massive negative externality. But rather than just throwing up more warning posters or increasing taxes on alcohol, they leaned on the research of an American psychology professor named Harvey Milkman.
Milkman's research is the key that unlocked this whole thing. Yeah. He realized that kids aren't necessarily addicted to the specific substance itself. They're actually addicted to the changes in their brain chemistry.
That was the paradigm shift. Milkman mapped out how different behaviors triggered different chemical responses. Teens who wanted to numb stress or escape trauma would turn to heroin or downers. But teens who were active confronters, the ones who wanted a massive adrenaline rush, they would turn to amphetamines or even high-risk behaviors like stealing cars or stealing hubcaps.
And alcohol, where does that fit in?
Alcohol acts as a sedative, but it first sedates the brain's control centers. It removes inhibitions and reduces social anxiety.
So Milkman looks at this and asks this incredibly profound question. If kids are just trying to alter their consciousness to cope with life or feel a rush, why not orchestrate a social movement around natural highs?
Exactly.
Why not get them high on their own brain chemistry, but just take the toxic substances completely out of the equation?
And that birthed the strategy. Instead of telling kids to just sit quietly and be good, which, let's face it, never works, they decided to completely replace the negative externality with a positive one. They launched Project Self-Discovery.
The genius of it is they didn't even tell the kids they were going into a drug treatment program.
No, not at all.
They just said, hey, we will teach you anything you want to learn. Music, dance, hip-hop, art, martial arts.
Because those activities provide the exact same alterations in brain chemistry the kids were seeking out on the streets.
Wow, so it's a direct substitute.
Completely. A martial arts class provides the intense adrenaline rush for the active confronters. An art or music class reduces anxiety and provides the calming focus for the kids looking to just numb out. They provided the physiological coping mechanisms naturally.
But they didn't just, open a community center and cross their fingers that kids showed up. Iceland executed this by combining every single economic tool we've talked about so far into one massive, coordinated strike. Let's look at the logistics of their playbook.
Okay.
First, they did actually use bans and legislation.
They did. They made it strictly illegal to buy tobacco under 18 and alcohol under 20. But the real kicker was the child curfews. Kids aged 13 to 16 had to be indoors by 10 p.m. in the winter and midnight in the summer.
Which, if you've ever tried to force a teenager to go to bed, you know how impossible that sounds.
Oh, yeah.
How do you enforce a national curfew on rebellious kids? The sources say even other countries like Sweden laughed at them and called it a literal child curfew.
Yeah, they got mocked for it. But you enforce it with massive structured parental involvement. They mandated parent organizations in every single school. It wasn't just a law on paper. It was a societal pact.
Right.
Parents actually organized patrols to walk the streets on weekend nights to make sure kids were heading home.
They also made parents sign these agreements to fundamentally shift household dynamics. They had to pledge to spend quantity time with their kids, not just occasional quality time, and to forbid any unsupervised parties.
But the real engine of this success was the subsidies. The state realized that if they wanted kids to actually choose these natural highs, they had to remove the financial barrier entirely.
This is my absolute favorite part.
Yeah.
In Reykjavik, they introduced the leisure card. It's direct government provision at its absolute finest.
It really is. The leisure card gave families 35,000 krona, which is about 250 British pounds per year per child, specifically designated to pay for recreational activities.
So it didn't matter if you were a low-income family. You could still afford to put your kids in organized sports or martial arts or music lessons 4 times a week.
Yeah, they removed the friction.
They made the merit good universally accessible to every single teenager. So, did this massive social engineering project actually work?
The data absolutely speaks for itself. In 1998, past-month teen drunkenness was at 42%. By 2016, it had plummeted to just 5%.
That is an unbelievable drop.
It is. Daily smoking fell from 23% down to 3%. And during that exact same time frame, participation in organized sports at least 4 times a week nearly doubled.
They literally swapped the demerit goods for merit goods on a national scale.
Yes.
By mapping the root cause of the behavior, the craving for a brain chemistry shift, and heavily subsidizing a healthy way to achieve it, they essentially engineered away a massive market failure.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this model isn't just a quirk of a small island nation. They actually started exporting this data-driven framework under the name Youth in Europe.
Oh, really? So it scales.
It does. When cities like Kaunas, Lithuania, applied this exact approach, they saw youth crime drop by 1/3 in just a single year.
Wow. It requires a profound level of community buy-in, obviously. But the welfare gain for society is immense.
It's staggering.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway from all this. From the heavy, road-crushing Cybertruck to the Austrian border-hopping cigarette buyers, all the way to the state-funded soccer fields of Iceland, We are constantly swimming in the economic ripples of each other's choices.
We really are. Think about the last time you made a major purchase or chose how to commute to work or even what hobby you decided to invest your free time in. You are actively participating in this massive, invisible web of social costs and benefits.
Yep.
Your private choices always have public consequences.
So what does this all mean for us today? Well, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. Iceland proved that if you understand the brain chemistry a society is actually craving, you can successfully subsidize natural, healthy highs to replace destructive addictions.
Which raises a really fascinating question about the future of public health.
Right. Looking at the world right now, could we eventually map and subsidize specific natural highs to replace our modern isolating addictions? What is the state-subsidized cure for doom scrolling on our phones? Or the societal replacement for ultra-processed foods? If we can identify the specific chemical hit we're getting from our screens, could a government build the modern equivalent of a leisure card to fix it?
That is a wild thought.
It's something to think about the next time you're on a crowded subway and someone bumps into you with a massive, rigid hiking backpack. We are all sharing the same space, just dealing with the weight of each other's choices. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.